Hi, this is Dr. Ruling here to welcome you to this special video. Please pray for me as I've just prayed that I can do this because I was better than halfway through and things just cut off. And I don't know whether the enemy is trying to interfere with this message, but I believe that it's vital and important. This webinar has been advertised as a high reward versus serious loss. Motivational speakers tell us that those are the two greatest motivators or incentives. And Christ, great teacher, mingled both of them in the wedding parable of Luke 12, where he promises to make us ruler over all that he has if we are so doing when he comes. Well, it's a different coming than most people are expecting, and it's the so doing are conditions that most people have no clue about. So I'm in Matthew 22, verse 3, actually verse 2, the king makes a marriage for his son. And in verse 3, he sends his servants to bid people to the wedding. Well, we can do that, and I'm doing that right now. I think that's the reason why he considers the last lukewarm church in Revelation 3 to be naked and blind in verse 17, because they don't understand that whole passage is about the wedding. Okay, there are 6 or 7 parallels to Luke's wedding parable. Both places get a knock, both are to open, both are to get a meal, and in Revelation 3:21 they sit with Christ on his throne, and in Luke 12:44 we're made ruler over all. Since my name is Ruling, I wanted to understand how that happens. I believe I do, and please take a listen to this. It's a time of judgment that's impending. And it takes judgment to select a bride. And we're going to deal with the bad news first in this webinar before we get to the good news and the specifics also. So the bad news is that time of judgment is impending on America. The good news is that God can deliver us. That's the book of Judges. The judges in the Bible were deliverers like Samson, Gideon. And the book of Daniel, his name means God is my judge. And God delivered him. So we can do that. That is good news. The first 6 chapters in the book of Daniel all show life or death issues. I happen to be coming from a Seventh-day Adventist background, but I'm not trying to get anybody to change churches. I believe all churches are fallen in an apostasy and not doing well. That's really the message of Scripture. But this is a non-denominational thing. It doesn't matter who. You don't have to be a member of some church to be ready for what's coming. And the Adventists, I think, were commissioned to give. It says in. Let me just back up and say that in 1844, a Baptist preacher by the name of William Miller proclaimed Christ's coming and a time of judgment on this world. And they gave a message: the bridegroom comes. They thought they would be raptured in the wedding. Okay. Well, nothing. It didn't happen. If you were to Google the Great Disappointment, that was their experience, the Great Disappointment. The Bible pictures it as a bitter belly experience in Revelation 10:10. They ate the little book of Daniel. It was sweet in the mouth. It tasted great, good message, but turned out bad in the stomach, okay, when it didn't happen as they expected. But in verse 11, Christ tells John, who typifies us, to prophesy again. And to do it again means a second time. I think we need to give those same messages a second time now when it's timely and when they will fit with a better understanding. And it's not about a quick snatch to heaven. A rapture is not where it's at. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:51 and 52 says, we shall all be changed in a moment, twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. At the last trump. There are 7 trumpets in Revelation 8 and 9. It says so in chapter Revelation 8, verse 6. 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepare to sound. And I believe it's one a year for the 7 years, just like Joseph's famine for 7, Nebuchadnezzar ate grass for 7. Jacob was betrothed to Rachel for 7 years. We can be betrothed to the bridegroom for 7. If we're faithful to our covenant, we eat the cake in heaven. But it's not a snatch out of here. Yes, I know a $1 million or $1 billion series made billions maybe off of fiction when they said one will be taken, the other left. Do you want to be taken? Well, read Luke 17, verse 36 and 7, the last two verses. Christ has the same story, but the disciples there in Luke 17th chapter say, "Where, Lord? Where are they taken?" Christ said, "Where the body is, there will the eagles be gathered." That's not where I want to go. I don't want to be a body eaten by the eagles. That's the dinner of the birds in Revelation 19, verse 17 and 18. So let's look more closely at the Bible. It says in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 18, to despise not prophesying, but prove all things. I'm going to prophesy, not because I've had dreams or visions or God has spoken in my ear, but we're supposed to regard the Bible as God's word specifically. And if you tell somebody Christ is coming again, that's a prophecy. The question is, how much do you know about it? And the more you know, the more you can tell. Amos 3:7 says God isn't going to do anything without revealing it. Okay, so it's all revealed. Let's just study to understand it better. And Psalm 90, verse 12 says, "Teach us to number our days that we can apply our hearts unto wisdom." So I want to share with you the number of days that we have, or years specifically, in a broad picture. Adventists missed something important in 1888. Actually, all of those Millerite people, in 1844, I should say. They thought that was the time of the end, because it was the end of a time prophecy that William Miller calculated to be 1844. Gabriel told in Daniel 8, verse 17, Gabriel says the vision's at the time of the end. But they didn't look at a concordance, because there are two visions in Daniel 8. And the first vision is a ram that's clobbered by a goat that flies from the west and stomps it and breaks its horns. Well, history shows, and historians say, that was fulfilled by Alexander the Great, that conquered the Medes and Persians. It mentions the Medes and Persians in Daniel 8:20. But at the time of the end, Medes and Persians are Iraq and Iran. And we're at the time of the end, and that vision so far is half fulfilled. Saddam, the king of the Medes or the Iraq, is gone, and we're waiting for the Iran to be a key ingredient, and that will be a heads-up sign to us in the near future that we are really on target, and we should be giving the message. Okay, I'm just going to give you an overview of this right now, but a well-known, at least to Adventists, preacher who's been on 3ABN and TV a lot, found this fascinating, that the kazone of ram and goat is at the time of the end. And it's a confirmatory sign to us in what I'm going to be telling you. Specifically, I believe in the broad strokes, there are reasons why 2023 will be the beginning of end times. I know we're listening to Christ, who said, "You don't know the day or hour." Yes, I understand that. That was the disciples who didn't need to know. When they asked when he's going to restore the kingdom to Israel in Acts 1:6, he said, "It's not for you to know the times and seasons." But Paul says, he uses the same phrase, "Of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write, for you know perfectly." Well, we should. And the context was that Paul was saying, "We which are alive and remain shall be caught up. And of the times and seasons you know perfectly." Well, we're in that time, and we should know, and I believe I have the message that everybody ought to consider to be ready for the bridegroom and the judgment. And we're talking about judgment today. We'll talk about the bridegroom next time, and the wedding parables more. But the judgment is a time of deliverance, like from Egypt. But death fell on the Egyptians, and they had to do certain stuff. They were supposed to kill the lamb and put the blood on the doorpost. That's the blood of Christ on the cross for us. We believe that. We accept it. But they also were to be awake that night and eat the Passover lamb and leave nothing to morning. Christ himself asked his disciples to watch and pray that night, and as you know, they slept. And they lost out, really, on a great opportunity, I think, to be with him in his time of need. And what I'm sharing with you is how we can do that, because I have to admit, when I try to pray very long, I fall asleep too. I'm like the disciples. But we can eat the lamb spiritually, and here's how you do it. You can read on the night of Passover, which was when they ate the Passover lamb. My favorite author says, as Christ ate the Passover with his disciples, he instituted in its place the service that was to be the memorial of his great sacrifice. That's in a book, Desire of Ages, a bibliography of Christ. In our Library of Congress, it was the most recommended book for many years on his life. And if we were to have the Lord's Supper that night on the eve of Passover, and then we watched and prayed, not like the disciples going to sleep, but we could review the closing scenes of Christ's life. Read a chapter out of that book, Desire of Ages, and then pray. Read another chapter, the Last Supper, Gethsemane, before Ananias, Caiaphas, the trials that Christ went through before Pilate, and the crucifixion scenes. When you do that and you see what he bore for us, you feel different. It changes you and makes you spiritually ready to die or to live for him. And there's a classic picture of a bullock between an altar and a plow. We should be ready to plow for him or to be sacrificed for him. That's what the book of Daniel shows. The three Hebrews, the Lord can deliver us, but if not, doesn't matter. We're not going to bow to this image which will represent the New World Order. Okay, it's coming in Revelation 13, and we're going to discuss these chapters of Daniel and Revelation from week to week so you understand them more. By the time you hear it from different directions, you'll understand it better. Going back now to Matthew 24, we see that Christ gave the signs of the end as wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes. Those signs have always been. And it's, not specific. It doesn't help us too much. But then he comes in verse 15 to the most specific sign of all, when you see the abomination spoken of by Daniel standing in the holy place. In Mark 13:14, it says, standing where it ought not. A different wording, but both of those are very insightful. And I'm telling you that the abominations, plural, in 2015 were standing where they ought not. First of all, Leviticus 18th chapter, verse 22, says if you lie mankind with womankind, if you lie mankind with mankind as with womankind, it's an abomination to God. And that definition of marriage, gay marriage, was standing where it ought not in the Supreme Court. And same year, 2015, the Pope comes to Congress, and he ought not to be there. He represents the system of abominations in Revelation 17, verse 5, mother of abominations. Well, we're not going to go into all of this and how, but that chapter does mention Rome as the city of seven hills in verse 9. It doesn't name it Rome, but it's the city of Rome is known as the city of seven hills. And the church is seen as a harlot when it's involved with politics worldwide. Christ said, my kingdom is not of this world, but that's what they're striving for, to control it through a new world order. They martyred or slaughtered 50 to 100 million Christians during the Dark Ages, and pioneers came to this country for freedom away from that. But now it's the whole country is changed. It's philosophically different. We have Roe v. Wade since 1973, where the Supreme Court approved of slaughtering the infants. Not good. That was, again, another abomination, really. And we are at the threshold of big things happening because of the signs of 2015. And I believe that from Roe v. Wade, it's 50 years, a jubilee interval, until 2023, when big things are going to happen. The 2023 is the year after a sabbatical year. It's the 50th. Sabbaticals come every 7. From Roe v. Wade, it would be 1973, 80, 87, 94, 201. These are dates that you recognize, I think. If you were alive in 1994, 1 million Protestant Tutsis were slaughtered in Rwanda, and the UN did nothing. That's the last organization that I would want in charge of the world, because they didn't protect the Protestants. They yielded to the Pope's, let the local government, which was Catholic, handle it. 7 years later, every sabbatical, 2001 was World Trade Center, big event. 7 years later, 2008, the stock market crashed after the Congress approved $760 billion to bail out banksters. We let common people bear the burden and make those guys rich. And 7 years later is 2015 with all of those signs that we just mentioned. There's going to be one more sabbatical year, and I believe it will be huge, followed by the end time day of the Lord. Day of the Lord is a phrase that is an extension of night of the Lord. In Exodus 12th chapter, verse 41, it mentions night of the Lord. That was when God liberated Israel when death fell on the Egyptians. And I believe day of the Lord will be, again, death falling on much of the world, because we have turned godless against him. Yeah, but the warning is, if we watch and pray, we can be protected. And we should be doing what Christ said when he said, when you see these abominations, flee. Early disciples understood that warning, and when Rome came to the city of Jerusalem in 66 AD, they took that sign and fled and got out of there, and they were spared the siege when millions died, or starvation. Mothers ate their own kids in 70 AD, etc. But what's coming will be worse, I believe, So not a good thing, and we need to get in the country, because Christ's little mini parables, starting around verse 37, learn a parable of the fig tree. It was as the days of Noah. Noah, it was widespread destruction. The next one is two will be in the field, one taken, the other left. We already discussed that. It's not about a rapture. I think it's about martial law. They'll come pick you up in the city, and they'll screen you in a FEMA camp. And if you're not in favor of New World Order and the Pope in charge, I think you're out of here. It's not a good ending. Okay. And the next one is the goodman, if he'd have known, would have watched, not suffered his house to be broken. I think the earthquake that initiates end time is going to break a lot of houses. And what I'm sharing with you can protect your house, especially if you're in your country and you're praying. And the next parable after that is about the evil servant that begins to smite his fellow servants. I think there's going to be a sudden storm of persecution. My favorite author says so. And most Adventists are thinking, well, it's going to come later. But I believe in the time of judgment that soon, even coming up in 2023, big events will happen, and there will be persecution. And people will be rounded up. My favorite author said after that, the pastors were not seen again. Okay, well, because they didn't give the warning, I think, and God didn't like the fact that they're preaching a peace and safety message. And Paul says that when they're preaching peace and safety, sudden destruction comes on them. Okay, those that aren't warning. And I'm giving the warning right now. I believe that we will see it coming and need to be getting ready for it. So this is the overview of serious loss if we're not prepared for that event, I think, in 2023. Now, it sounds like I'm going against the Bible to say 2023 on the surface, because didn't Christ tell when the disciples wanted to know when he's going to restore the kingdom, he said, will you restore it now? They said that. And he said it's not for you to know the times or seasons, those two words. Okay. But Paul, let me just say that phrase, times and seasons, is found 3 times in the Bible. In Daniel 2:21, kings are set up and taken down according to times and seasons. Christ said it's not for you to know to his disciples. But Paul says, in the context of the end times, when we which are alive and remain will be caught up, he says, of the times and seasons, you have no need that I write, for you know perfectly. And then he talks about the day of the Lord comes as a thief with sudden destruction, when they're saying peace and safety, as travail on a woman with child. Now that's what Egypt did. Egypt travailed. It didn't want to give up the slaves, but it did birth them. God said, Israel's my firstborn, and let my people go, And that was the message of the Exodus. Well, another Exodus is going to be repeated. In Revelation 15, we find that there's a group of people, 144,000, who sing the Song of Moses. Nobody else can learn that song. Why? Because they didn't have that experience. We sing now, how much I love the Lord, and so on. Well, anybody can sing it, but they don't necessarily mean it. But in heaven, you can only express what you really know by experience. And there'll be a group that can sing that song, and we can be part of it. So I thank you for considering this. I ask you to please stay with us. We will be talking next time about the wedding parables and how we get to be ruler over all. I've covered enough this time right now to chew and think about. And I want to ask you to go to a website where you can sign up and be subscribed, so to speak, to a notice each week, because this is not for everybody. Just like Christ didn't give all of his teaching to the multitude and everyone, he had an inner core of people, and he wanted the disciples to know certain things. Well, I'm wanting you as disciples. Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. And I'm telling you the same thing. Follow me as I follow Christ. And it's kind of like a grapevine. There's a big stem and there's larger branches. But if you get in now, you can have a larger branch with other people following you. I'm saying that the churches that we've been attending have fallen. They're in the Laodicean state. They do not have this wedding message. And I've shared how that Revelation 3 is a copy of Luke's 12 wedding parable, because both places there's a knock, both places open, both places get a meal, and ruler over all that he has is the same as sitting on the throne. I want that experience for you as well as for myself. I believe it's for 144,000 whom he is going to anoint with power in the near future, actually when the whole thing starts, so that they can be united in what they have. But in the meantime, we need to study and get ready, like Abraham Lincoln said. He said, someday my chance will come. Well, we're going to get the chance, but if it's a wait and see, I'll wait and see. You won't have time to study it out then and be ready. I can just promise you that. I didn't come to my understanding of it overnight or in a year. I've been looking at this actually for a third of a century, since I went to a Bible prophecy conference in Lincoln, Nebraska, heard about Jubilee and God's name. I always thought that Lord was the name of God and God was the name of Lord. I didn't know he had a name. Translators removed God's name from the Bible and supplanted it with those Lord in all caps wherever you see it. Bad idea. Christ said not one jot or tittle. It was really Yod. The Hebrew letter Yod is the first letter of God's name, and they removed the whole name. And in the Ten Commandments, you can see it 7 times. Lord, 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 all caps. I'm seeing that a 7-time emphasis is a mark of end-time truth, and I'll tell you more about it later. But right now, I want you to go to a landing page and sign up for this course. I can promise you more information of value and real stuff that you haven't heard about before, if you will join. And I promise you this eating DVD free if I'm wrong. And by the way, I may have promised this before. On the website Health, Happiness, and Destiny, you can go there and you can see 8 minutes of the DVD. It shows how to reverse most diseases by eating well. And I'm saying that I'll gift you a copy free if you're disappointed and don't feel that I'm giving you new stuff or whatever. But I think you've heard a lot today, and the preachers aren't giving it, okay? It's peace and safety from their perspective, and we need a time of judgment unpending and get ready. And the wedding parables we'll talk about next time. You'll find the link after you go to a landing page that I'm going to put in the description below. I don't have it yet. I got to get that from A. Weber. But once I have the landing page, look in the description and go there, sign up, and let me explain the cost, if I may, because basically I'm disappointed in my church. It gets $1 billion in tithe a year. It has millions in the stock market, and parts or components of my church have invested in, I saw a little t-shirt, veggies and vino, not good. Vino is wine, not good. And they have purchased, Adventist Health has purchased that along with a coffee thing, Blue Zone. They're marketing that to the world. And I know as a physician, coffee's not good either. It's a major study in the New England Journal of Medicine linked coffee drinking to cancer of the pancreas. Hundreds of cases have proven that were a strong association, not associated with tobacco, not associated with alcohol, but coffee drinking. Strong association to cancer of the pancreas. My point is that, we don't need those substances. The church has fallen. It's not doing what it was commissioned to do. It was supposed to prophesy again of the things I'm telling you about. And now is the time. I've sent information to Ministry Magazine and other organizations, people, leaders, and it's like talking to a deaf wall, stone wall. They're deaf. And in Isaiah 22, around verse 16, Isaiah 42, It says, "Who is blind as my servant and deaf as my minister?" That's what they are, basically, in my opinion. And if they don't need your tithe, but I believe a message needs to be given to Americans specifically. I believe Southern California is going to have a major earthquake. My favorite author saw an earthquake while visiting the school that she founded. Many lives were blotted out. Buildings great and small were falling to the ground. And if you think that she might not be a true prophet, look in the same book, Volume 9 of the Testimonies to the Church, page 11, 12, and 13. It's called The Last Crisis on page 11. She's in New York City and sees tall buildings warranted to be fireproof but consumed as if made of pitch. She saw this, and it was published in 1909, a century, more than a century ago, for 9/11. How did she know? Well, I think she was a true prophet. God showed her. And the earthquake, though, is also true. And people need a warning. And so help us, if you will, by giving a tithe to Total Health. I don't need your money myself. I'm on Social Security, and I'm comfortable. This is not for me, but it is for a warning that needs to be given. Planning to go to Loma Linda, Southern California in the spring, and do what I can to help wake people, warn people. And I'm under God's commission to do the best I can, and the money is not for me. But if you will give a tithe, you'll be able to sign up and get the mailing list with that understanding. So go to the link in the description box below this video and sign up. God bless you. Thank you so much. We'll see you at the top.